first glimpse of the wall.
And do you find it depressing?
Yes, I certainly do. It symbolizes the divisions of mankind.
Have you ever seen anything so disastrous as this?
Not really. Certainly there are the divisions that continue to exist, but when it's symbolized with an actual wall, it becomes very depressing.
Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia on January 15, 1929. His birth certificate listed his name as Michael King Jr., after his father, Michael King Sr. How and when did Michael King become Martin Luther King? Martin Luther King, the father of the civil rights leader, was born Michael King on December 19, 1899 in Stockbridge, Georgia, the eldest son of 9 children in a poor family that made its living as sharecroppers. In 1926, King began his studies to become a Baptist minister at the Morehouse School of Religion. That same year, on Thanksgiving Day, he married Alberta Williams in the Ebenezer Baptist Church that her father headed in Atlanta. After the death of Alberta's father, King took over as the pastor of the Ebenezer Church in March 1931, a position he would hold for 4 decades. In 1934, he was able to join 10 other Baptist ministers for a trip to the Holy Land and Europe, which included a visit to Berlin, Germany. King may have traveled to Berlin knowing that the next Baptist World Alliance gathering was to be held in Atlanta in 1939. Hitler was now in power in Germany, and Nazi banners were hanging in the large hall beside Christian crosses. While the German press noted the radically integrated audience, there was a delegation of 30 Black Baptists, including Reverend King, and a church commission on radicalism strongly condemned the color bar and anti-Semitism. Many of the American Baptists in Berlin viewed the non-smoking, non-drinking Hitler and the Nazis in a more positive light. The Nazis achieved a propaganda coup that made people think erroneously that the Nazis were accepting of the Christian faithful and their churches. However he may have felt about Nazi Germany, King returned to Atlanta so inspired by his journey and the great Lutheran reformer Martin Luther that he decided to change his name and that of his son. Over the years, there was a transformation of the names from Michael King to Michael Luther King and finally Martin Luther King Jr. It was not until July 1957 that the Michael King Jr. birth certificate was amended to read Martin Luther King Jr. In September 1964, at the invitation of Willy Brandt, then West Berlin's mayor, later West German chancellor, 35-year-old Martin Luther King Jr. traveled to Berlin to speak at a ceremony commemorating the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, who had visited West Germany in 1963. After a ceremony at the Schönberg City Hall, where JFK had given his Ich bin ein Berliner speech, King spoke to an audience of over 20,000 people in the Waldbühne amphitheater near the Olympic Stadium, the same Olympic Stadium where the 1936 Berlin Olympics were held, and Jesse Owens received 4 gold medals. The occasion was Tag der Kirche, or Day of the Church. Not content to speak only to the West Germans, King insisted on visiting East Berlin, against the wishes of the U.S. government. Even after the American embassy had confiscated his passport and detained his interpreter, King, accompanied by a second interpreter, arrived by car at Checkpoint Charlie, where he presented his American Express card when asked for ID. The East Berlin audience's reaction to his words of freedom and civil disobedience was dramatically different. Dr. King also took time to speak with Black students at East Berlin's Humboldt University. not far from the Marian Kirche. Because of the standing room only audience at the first church, a second appearance was arranged at the last minute for the Sophiankirche near the Brecht Theater. In both cases, people learned of King's visit only by word of mouth. King was mobbed by autograph seekers before he left the church. No mention of his amazing visit to the capital of the GDR ever appeared in the East German media. GDR citizens were not allowed to hear or read words such as, "Here on either side of the wall are God's children, and no man made barrier can obliterate that fact." This is the text from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech given at the 1964 edition of the Berlin Jazz Festival. God has wrought many things out of oppression. He has endowed his creatures with the capacity to create, and from this capacity has flowed the sweet songs of sorrow and joy that have allowed man to cope with his environment and many different situations. Jazz speaks for life. The blues tell the story of life's difficulties, and if you think for a moment, you will realize that they take the hardest realities of life and put them into music, only to come out with some new hope or sense of triumph. This is triumphant music. Modern jazz has continued in this tradition, singing the songs of a more complicated urban existence. When life itself offers no order and meaning, the musician creates an order and meaning from the sounds of the earth which flow through his instrument. It is no wonder that so much of the search for identity among American Negroes was championed by jazz musicians. Long before the modern essayists and scholars wrote of racial identity as a problem for a multiracial world, musicians were returning to their roots to affirm that which was stirring within their souls. Much of the power of our freedom movement in the United States has come from this music. It has strengthened us with its sweet rhythms when courage began to fail. It has calmed us with its rich harmonies when spirits were down. And now, jazz is exported to the world. For in the particular struggle of the Negro in America, there is something akin to the universal struggle of modern man. Everybody has the blues. Everybody longs for meaning. Everybody needs to love and be loved. Everybody needs to clap hands and be happy. Everybody longs for faith. In music, especially this broad category called jazz, there is a stepping stone towards all of these. Barack Obama in Berlin, 2008. Quote, "I know that I don't look like the Americans who've previously spoken in this great city," end quote. Really? On July 24, 2008, presumptive presidential candidate Barack Obama drew enthusiastic crowds in Berlin for his televised speech at the Siegessaal, or Victory Column, just down the street from the Brandenburg Gate. His address was well received, but in it, he neglected to mention something important. The other famous African American man who drew crowds not only in West Berlin, but also in East Berlin. Obama did not mention or even hint at Martin Luther King's Cold War era visit to Germany 44 years earlier. Obama preferred to evoke memories of Kennedy and Reagan rather than the iconic black man he claims to greatly admire.